Hello, my beautiful blossoms, blooms, and buds. I'm Rosebud Reads, and welcome to my book garden. Welcome, actually, to my basement. But there are lots of books, and my lovely chat is my book garden, so it counts. But anyway, welcome to part 3 of Copper Coins. I was about to say Peerless, but that's not right. Part 3 of book 1 of Copper Coins, which I'm very excited to continue. Um, this is a chill stream, and what that means is I will very frequently, thankfully, be chatting with my lovely book garden, such as hello, Chichi Kiki. How are you doing today? I will also be talking to myself, talking to the book, occasionally looking something up, either a reference photo or if I am a little unsure about the meaning of a word or just want to clarify. So that's kind of what we do. It's not everyone's flavor of reading, which is totally understandable. We all like different things, but maybe stick around. You might enjoy it. You never know. If not, no hard feelings. This is also a mature stream, so we will be doing well, not doing. We will be speaking about or occasionally have mature things come up. That could be triggering things, that could be sexy times, that could be gore. But yes, good. I just finished reading The Beauty's Blade and it was so good. Ooh, that is still on my TBR. Hello Annika and hello Truffle. It might be triggering. It will be in the title with a trigger warning. It will have a little description in the description page, as well as a timestamp kind of marking where the trigger warning starts, where it ends. So anyone watching live, no hard feelings if things start to get dicey and you think something's going a certain way. If you come back and watch it later, just so you have a little heads up. You take care of yourself, you be good to yourself, and do what you gotta do for your mental health. And you wanted more after the ending. Just finished Salted Fish 3 the other night. So good! Hello, Jiang Rulian. Welcome as well, and you just finished Salted Fish 3. Reading Salted Fish 2. I've read some of those as well. I attended a couple of Hellfest streams, which are still up. Very nice. But yes. I am not sponsored. I don't make anything from this. The only thing I own from this is the physical copy that's sitting over there right now and my time, and sometimes not even that. But, yeah. If I ever do get sponsored, you'll be the first to know. I am also not a fluent speaker. I try my best, but I will probably stumble over names and or places more often than not. But I will try, and I am open to pronunciation suggestions. Speaking of books though, right now I am working through the Villain's White Halo, and I am enjoying it. I was expecting some more hijinks than have occurred, and, like, at the beginning, it's definitely a lot more hijinks, a little like, ha-has, but it became a little more serious as we go on. Not saying that there aren't probably going to be hijinks to pop up, but I'm really enjoying it. I ordered the second, in the series. Hello, Ruby Bonico. Welcome. How are you doing tonight? And yeah, I'm like 70 pages from the end of it, so that'll definitely be finished tomorrow. But yeah, I recommend it. So, speaking about tomorrow, I changed it already on when it's preloaded, but I will be streaming tomorrow instead of Thursday. One of my friends needs me to help babysit, and it was rather sudden. they need to go take care of something. So I need to have Thursday open. But we will be doing our second stream tomorrow, so it'll still be fresh in our brain. So it's all good. But yes, if I want hijinks, the divine white cat scratching posts is the way to go. Yeah, no, definitely. My niece will get to be there to also play with them, so it'll be a nice time. Their kid is the sweetest. One of their comments recently was like, "Why is everyone in my class so loud? Why don't they follow the rules?" And I'm just like, "Oh, honey, it doesn't get better. It doesn't get better." Green Yuri's pretty good too. I've read the first 2 volumes, and it's okay, but I got distracted more with I'm definitely more an ancient cultivation style one, but yeah. No. Oh, he's the sweetest. He's such a good boy. And my niece is so into crafts and so happy to play with other people. But yeah, so they'll have a great time. They just also need an adult to be there. So that's me. I mean, I'll also play, but like, yeah. No. Green Arrow was very good. I just so many other things. Ooh, mistakenly saving the villain. Second volume is in transit for me. Nice. That one definitely does get darker. I mean, the first volume had a lot of darker themes, but it continues with those darker themes. It's still really good though. Like very much good. I'm looking forward to reading book 3 for that one as well, once it comes out. I found out through research though, that the last Villain's White Halo book actually comes out, I think, August 5th. It's sometime in August, so I'm like, ooh, that's the final book in the version. It's kind of nice just to have some of the shorter ones like this series. But yes. Nanchan Volume 2. Oh, that's a heavy one. But I hope you're enjoying Ruby Bonico. I'm just gonna call you Ruby if that's okay. But yeah. Salted Fish is a good one as well. I'm seeing if I've forgotten anything. Nope. The only thing left is pronunciation is hard, which is true. Okay. I'm glad Ruby is fine. I just feel like I'm kind of butchering your last name. Like, I can say it, Banico. I just feel like I stumble over it, and I'm trying to do my best. Okay. Finish second volume of 12 Kingdoms. I like the main character just reaching her fuck it point. I have still been keeping an eye out at my Kinokuniya for volume 1 of 12 Kingdoms, and I don't know if someone is just yoinking it from the shelf as soon as I walk in and just being like, "Oh, she's back." I might just have to finally buckle down and order it from Amazon because I'm so done trying to get it in person. Every other volume has been available except number 1, and I'm like so done. But that being said, I do have a new volume. I could not resist buying the new copy of Golden Terrace because it is one of the OGs for this channel. One of the things that started it all. So I did end up picking it up. And will pick up book 2 when it comes out. Right? Super pretty. Let's see some of the pictures inside. So we got our boys. Let's see. Another picture of our boys. Hopefully not spoileries. That's definitely Spoiler. There we go. This isn't too much of a spoiler. There we go. So pretty! Yeah, we did the complete series of the original one, Ruby, in one of my older playlists. The audio might be a little worse, but it's all there. Just as an option. No pressure. Absolutely no pressure, but just saying it's there. And yes, the art looks so good. I think if you do compare translations, Truffle, definitely tell me if there's like significant differences. 'Cause I'm intrigued by that. Oh, that almost is a broken candle. I also got some merch. Nice. Peach Blossom Debt only has. Oh, you mean from the company? Yeah, no pressure, Ruby. So, yes, merch. So not Don May merch, but like kind of gay. Anyway, they are so like married. They are so married. Like they literally have a spin-off where it's them cooking in the kitchen after the girls go to sleep and like making sure the girls get nutrition. Yeah. Witch Hat. Literally, I have read what is available for the Witch Hat Atelier kitchen, and they are so gay. They are so happily married gay. Oh, Olrugio is amazing. And then, so this is from Jundi Designs. Jundi Designs. They have really good prices. Yes. And then they gave me a little doodle note. So I was like, oh, cute. And then also not actually Don May, but one of my current obsessions. Oh, next time I'll have to show you the Rocky that my mom knitted, crocheted for me, but I bought one of the little packs, fan packs. So. Veil of Shadows is definitely an intense one. But yeah. Here's Grace. Just by himself. And he's super soft. But yeah. Okay. I think that's all the new stuff that I currently have. Oh, I'm just gonna put it back in the box. Okay. Yeah. I've seen the first few episodes of Veil of Shadows, but it got dark real quick. Yeah. All right. I know I've rambled on. Yeah. Cannot not be intense. Well, they succeeded. All right. I think we'll get started. I need to figure out. So recap. We're starting at 15. There's a happy ending somewhere. Fingers crossed. All right. So, last time, we had Shushian, Xuanmin, and Jiang. What's his name? Jiang Xining got out of the array a bit before because he went through the desk door. I think this guy orders fake blood by the tanker. Him and Markiplier, apparently. So they were stuck in the 12 or the 8 trigrams array, I believe. And they were looking for the life door and the death door and running away from all of the random possessed kind of mere doppelgangers of Madame Liu, and at one point Liu Chong and Scholar Liu that were chasing them, and it would be very bad if they caught them. And they found the door and were going through it, and then Liu Chong heard his grandmother's voice, who he was very, very close to. We found out that they had a really sweet relationship. And potentially there was a scandal between Grandma Liu and the Liu family, and the Jiang family, who were doctors, and were making her medicine. So we might have that to look forward to, but as at the current point, Liu Chong rushes out right before they're about to go through the life door, and it closes, and they are now... Xuanmin lifted an arm, ready to haul Liu Chong back, but when he did so, a muffled drone echoed in Shushian's head. His vision darkened, and the world seemed to spin. When Shushian came back to his senses, the scene before him had completely changed. They were standing by the door of Liu Chong's shack, with Jiang Xining's pale face in front of them. But Liu Chong had vanished. It was clear they'd escaped the array, and at the last moment before their escape, Liu Chong had pulled back, thus remaining trapped inside. So, before we get further, I totally suspect that Scholar Liu had a hand in poisoning his grandma and then framed the Jiang clan for they poisoned her. That is just my personal assumption because he's such a shady guy and he seems like the type to do that. But it's not set in stone as of yet. Yeah, Annika, would not surprise me. Let's do our counts real quick and then we'll get started with chapter 7. So, our donkey count is sitting at a solid 10, which is kind of impressive for 2 parts in. Our Jiang Xining suffering is sitting at a rather sad 8. Our wanted poster count is set at 3. Our face count is set at 4. And Truffle, you are again on deck to tell me when the face count comes into play. Justice for Grandma Liu! Yeah, she treated Liu Chong really sweetly. So, of course, she's no longer in the picture. But yes. Awesome. Okay, so we are starting at 1945. I'm going to take a quick sip, and then we will start chapter 7. Empty Millstone. Empty Millstone. You finally made it out. Jiang Xining let out a sigh of relief upon seeing them safe and sound. However, halfway through his sigh, he tensed again. But where are Liu Dagonzi and Scribe Liu. Are they still trapped inside? Oh, so Scribe Liu also got caught in it. We didn't know because he was technically outside the door when he was coming in. So it was unclear whether he also got trapped in the ray. So apparently he did. Xuanmin nodded, then entered the inner chambers without a second word. Since he didn't speak, Jiang Xining was too afraid to say anything. He slowly trailed after Xuanmin and stood in the doorway in front of the inner chambers, watching as the monk crouched at the copper nails and talismans that had been hammered into the floor. Jiang Xining knew nothing about these things, but Xu Xian did. He had a shallow understanding of what was going on. To break through an array, there were two methods: from the inside or from the outside. Solid. Those inside needed to find the exit, but if you were outside of the array and wanted to free those trapped inside, the simplest method was to destroy it. I was gonna say I've known Grandma Liu for 2 minutes, but if anything happened to her, then remembered it already did. Right? Right, I agree, Ruby. Scribe Liu is better off trapped in the array. Destroying arrays was also a skill. After all, those who made a living handling ghosts and spirits relied on setting and breaking arrays to survive. If they were easy to break, how would they earn any money? When Xu Xian saw Xuanmin squat before the talismans, he perked up immediately, leaning forward with wide eyes. He was eager to see how Xuanmin would break the formation and what kind of skills he'd display. He's reaching out, Xu Xian thought. He kept his gaze fixed on Xuanmin's outstretched hand as it approached the talisman. Slowly, he grasped one of the copper nails. What do you want to bet? He's just going to pull it out of the ground. Xu Xian held his breath as he quietly speculated. Is he going to cut his hand and draw blood, or perhaps use some kind of finger technique? Then Xuanmin gripped the half-buried nail hard and yanked it right out of the ground while casually tearing the yellow talisman stuck to it. I knew it! Next, he yanked out the second nail and ripped the second talisman. Same with the third. That was it. Xu Xian silently watched Xuanmin destroy the copper nails and talismans in the most mundane way possible before nonchalantly wiping his hands. A mournful despondence swept over Xu Xian as if he'd drunk from the waters of the underworld, and he grew limp again. He had no idea if Xuanmin's fellow charlatans would want to die after witnessing the scene, but Xu Xian himself did, at least a little. Yeah, finger technique phrasing, right? Xuanmin always goes for the direct solution. That was very direct. After that, Xuanmin stood up and went to the outer chambers. Sweeping a glance across the table, he found a fire starter in a corner. He struck it against the wall, lit a small flame, then burned the 3 talismans to cinders. Meanwhile, Xu Xian was too busy contemplating death to watch the scene as it unfolded. Judging from Xuanmin's actions, the array was already broken. Soon enough, they would hear that fool, Liu Chong, and his whimpering. Xuanmin is on top of my favorite male lead. He's definitely pretty funny in a very stoic way. However, 15 minutes later, neither Liu Chong nor Scribe Liu had appeared. Xu Xian craned his neck to look outside the door, then eyed the inner chambers. Aside from Jiang Xining, there was neither hide nor hair of anyone else. It hadn't worked. Was Xuanmin just messing with them? From what they'd seen, the oppressive yin energy within the house had two causes. First was the drawing the river to the sea layout. Second was its status as the Death Gate's location. Now, the Death Gate had transformed into the Life Gate, and the array had been destroyed by Xuan Min in the crudest way possible, yet the yin energy showed no signs of dissipating. Outside the shack, the morning light was luminous as it poured into the Liu residence from the east. But the fire prevention wall blotted out some of the rays, casting darkness over the front of the building. Half of the roof lay under the sun, while the other half remained in shadow, like the intersection of yin and yang. Shushian raised his head to look at Jiang Shining. What are you sighing for all of a sudden? You're not the one trapped in the array. Jiang Shining blinked, guileless. I didn't sigh. Wasn't that you? Of course not. I never sigh. Why would I depress myself? Both of them fell silent as they stared at each other before they slowly swiveled to look at Xuanmin. That quiet sigh came again, but Xuanmin hadn't opened his mouth. Even if he had, they still wouldn't have thought him the source of the sound. It was long drawn and fretful as it trailed off. A feeble sigh, like the sound of someone elderly. There was no way it could have come from Xuanmin. Oh, it's Grandma! His resolve is very impressive. Sounds like an old lady, Shu Xian surmised. Say, it doesn't really sound like a sigh, does it? Jiang Xining gestured animatedly as he spoke. More like someone when they're exhausted. Maybe a frail person after traveling a long distance or carrying something heavy. When they can't catch their breath, that's the sound they make. Like a sigh, but not exactly the same. He thought for another moment, then added, the breathing is weak and spent. They're ill. You can glean all that from listening to a sigh. Shushian eyed him in disbelief. Jiang Xining waved his hand. If my parents were still alive, they'd be able to glean even more. Oh, said Shushian. He didn't say more, but his mind was racing. An old lady? Panting in exhaustion? Well, ill? Now that Jiang Xining had said so, it really did seem like the case. Remembering something, Shu Xian raised a flimsy hand and started hitting Xuan Min. Worried that he wasn't striking hard enough, he also threw in some words. Oi! Bull donkey! Look at me! Xuan Min looked down. That is 11. Xuan Min looked down. After a moment, Shu Xian stifled his emotions and waved his hand dismissively. Never mind. Better if you don't look. Point your eyeballs somewhere else. Shu Xian is so reckless. This was the first time Xuanmin had heard someone tell him that. Shu Xian was truly an unreasonable evil spirit. What Xuanmin didn't know was that Shu Xian had gotten used to his existence as a dragon. He was always the one looking down on others, quite literally, while no one ever looked down on him. He could accept the occasional downward glance from Xuanmin, but being scrutinized from above by his gaze, Shu Xian couldn't take it. Dragons were proud creatures, and he felt his pride was especially important at times like these. However, Xuanmin didn't withdraw his gaze. He continued to stare as if playing contrarian, so purposely doing the opposite. So to be contrary is to go against what someone's saying just because they said it. You're being contrary. This bastard, Shu Xian thought. He used that unpleasant, wide-eyed corpse look of his to send a fake smile to Xuan Min, then rolled his eyes. Finally, when that didn't work, Shu Xian turned around and spoke with his back to Xuan Min. I wanted to talk about old lady Liu. Have you ever heard of a particularly inhumane method used to protect houses? I first heard about it while mingling with humans. They said that when an elderly person passes, burying them beneath the house can bless the descendants with long-lasting fortune. And I'm liking Scholar Lu less and less by the moment. What son would have ever come up with something so disgusting? The scholar Jiang Xining was struck speechless, feeling like all the morality and ethics he'd studied for the past dozen years had been ground into dust. I have heard of that, Xuanmin said in a low voice. It's called building yang over yin. The soul trapped beneath the compound is refined into a yin spirit that guards the home. When combined with a feng shui array, the effects are remarkable. As he spoke, another trembling sigh rang out. The first two sighs had been faint, almost non-existent, but this one was much clearer. Clear enough that they could tell its source. Xuanmin's gaze swept over a corner to his right, and he walked over to it. An enormous number of paper ingots were strewn over the floor, covering most of it. This had prevented them from noticing any potential tricks in the flooring. He's made of paper, you'd think he'd be more mindful of that. He doesn't care. The author really comes up with lovely techniques. Even Wei Wuxian would blush. Yeah. Xuanmin crouched down in the corner. From here, he could see the wooden cabinet within the inner chambers that had been facing the copper nails and talismans. He swept the ingots away and curled his pointer finger, then tapped the ground twice. The sound echoed, indicating that there was space underneath. It's hollow, Shu Xian and Jiang Xining exclaimed together. Xuanmin spotted a crack in the wall. Following that crack with his eyes led him to a narrow four-way crack shaped like a cross. It just so happened to be on a stone slab around the size of 4 hands. This crack. Jiang Xining reached out to test it. The fingers won't fit. All 4 sides of the crack were exceedingly tight, too narrow to fit human fingers, meaning that they couldn't force it open with their hands. If the stone slab couldn't be pried open, they'd never learn what lay beneath. Shu Xian looked at Jiang Xining's pale ghostly hand, then at Xuanmin's slender fair one. Finally, he said reluctantly, Fine. I guess I'm the only one who'll fit. I'll deign to slide myself in and give it a push. I'll deign. This genius truly has no concept of shame, Jiang Xining thought. His declaration finished, Shu Xian made an exaggerated roll of his shoulders and leapt from Xuanmin's pouch. Xuanmin let the evil spirit be, allowing him to tumble toward the stone crack. Right as Shu Xian moved, Xuanmin reached into his pouch to procure a cloth bag, opening it to reveal its contents. Within that cloth bag was a neat row of needles of varying lengths. The longest spanned the distance from wrist to knuckle, while the shortest were around the length of 2 finger joints. Okay, so the first one is from wrist to knuckle, so this, well, which knuckle? We'll say here, wrist to knuckle, so that long, and then 2 is this. Okay. There was something engraved on the heads of all the needles, but it was difficult to make out with how intricate they were. From his vantage point, Jiang Xining only managed a vague sideways impression and was too polite to lean over for a closer look. He's such a sweetie. Xuanmin picked out one of the thicker needles and returned the rest to his pouch. Meanwhile, Xian was dragging himself toward the stone. Just as he reached the crack and was about to slip inside, a hand descended from above and grabbed him by the head, lifting him back up. So dignified. Xian didn't even need to look. It was obviously Xuanmin's hand. Well, donkey, you'll pay for your crimes one day. 12. I eagerly await your punishment, Xuanmin said blandly. After that, he put Xian, still in the middle of raging about wasted efforts, back into his pouch before inserting his silver needle into the crack. Holding the other end, he pushed upward hard. There was a hollow scraping sound. That's the best I got. The frail-looking needle had managed to lift one edge of the slab. Xuanmin braced his fingers beneath the raised edge, then pried the entire slab free. In that instant, a legion of grieving, mournful wails surged out like a tide. Ooh! Xian felt as if a 1,000-ton force had slammed into his chest, knocking his senses right out of him. It was fortunate he was made of paper, or he might have hacked up his lungs from the impact. At the same time, his ears were assaulted by Jiang Xining's undignified scream and Xuanmin's muffled grunt. By the time he'd regained his awareness, Jiang Xining had been hurled into the wall, reverting to his original form with a puff before fluttering to the floor. There he lay, more dead than usual. Xuanmin had a hand pressed to his chest, and he coughed several times before collecting himself. What was that? Xian asked, exhausted. It was all he could do to dangle from the pouch's entrance. He could barely raise his head to look at the square opening in the ground. The fresh hole was partially filled with yellow soil, and he could vaguely see an iron chain with a talisman wrapped around its length protruding from the soil. Strangely, the iron chain was rotating on its own. I don't think so. Oh. I'll allow it. Truffle. 9. Strangely, the iron chain was rotating on its own. Frowning, Xuanmin scanned the damp yellow soil before he looked up to search the room. Xian watched in confusion as Xuanmin stood up and walked to the table. He rummaged until he found a brush, its bristles half gone, then returned to the hole and swept away the soil using the brush. Xian really had to hand it to Xuanmin. So fussy, he silently scoffed. Will your fingers rot away if they touch some dirt? When Xuanmin had finished brushing aside the yellow soil, what sat concealed beneath it became visible. That's a millstone? Xian said, confused. The round stone block had a hole in the center, a solid base, and a horizontal rod extending from its side. Definitely a millstone. However, the stone was unusually small, only about the size of a palm. Its surface was also atypical, being carved with 2 sets of complex runes. One end of the iron chain was secured to the millstone's base, while the other was attached to the rod. Without the yellow soil cushioning it, the chain fell right onto the millstone, making faint scraping sounds as it moved. With each inch it moved, the horizontal rod rotated slightly, as if an invisible person was ceaselessly pushing the empty millstone day and night. "Old Lady Liu," Shushian called without thinking. That weary sigh echoed once more. Shushian felt a chill run down his spine. Of course, paper couldn't get cold, and he wasn't scared, but the thought that a person could trap their own mother underground just to guarantee themselves a prosperous future filled him with disgust. Some people were remarkably grotesque in their wickedness. Raising a millstone would be better than raising a son like that. Xuanmin reached in and removed that millstone, no larger than his palm, from the hole. Placing it on the ground, he peeled off the yellow talisman wrapped around the iron chain, then lit a tendril of flame, burning it to ashes. As the yellow talisman was swallowed, Shushian, who was hanging by the pouch's entrance, sensed a faint droning vibration. It felt like someone was striking a hammer against his bones, the force neither hard nor soft, but distinctly unpleasant. This millstone had been sealed underground for at least 3 years, absorbing great quantities of resentful energy from its surroundings. With the talisman gone, the bitter energy bound to it was dissipating. An adverse reaction to the sensation was normal. But if he, a limp paper doll at a distance, felt this much discomfort, the man burning the talisman must have been suffering even more. Shushian turned to glance at Xuanmin, only to find him completely unaffected. His expression was cold, as if he were doing a different task entirely. Shushian had a sudden sense that Xuanmin was unlike any monk he'd seen before, but he couldn't pinpoint exactly how. Perhaps he was just extra infuriating. 1 second. While Shushian was thinking his ridiculous thoughts, Xuanmin finished burning the talisman. As the last of its ashes fluttered to the ground, the iron chain fastened to the millstone snapped with a crack and clattered to the floor. The faint shadow leaning against the millstone slowly came into focus. At first, it resembled a withered branch curled upon the ground. But before Shushian and Xuanmin's eyes, it swelled, morphing into a hunched old woman. The old woman's hair was sparse and white, tied into a limp bun at the back of her head. Her face was etched with deep creases, and her eyes were clouded, as if perpetually brimming with old tears. Her appearance bore a faint resemblance to that of old Lady Liu, yet this version, now a true ghost, seemed even more frail than the cane-using apparition within the array. It looked as if she might shut her eyes and collapse at any moment. Without her cane, her crooked body seemed even more deformed. Her left side was much more shrunken than her right. She could barely stand upright and had to support herself against the millstone's rod. How horrific, Shushian muttered. As a creature born from nature, he'd grown up without parents and thus had little understanding of familial bonds. However, after being thrust into human society for those last 6 months, he'd managed to glean some superficial insights. Scribe Liu had opened Shushian's eyes to a new low. To do something so monstrous. How much did he hate his own mother? Xuanmin glanced down at him, and his gaze left Shushian a little perturbed. He defiantly raised his chin and glared back, but it was lacking in strength. He rolled his eyes. A moment later, he came up with a great idea. To the head! He'd always acted on impulse, so he wasted no time hauling himself up Xuanmin's robe using his arms. As he'd done this before, his movements were much nimbler this time. In a flash, he'd reached the front of Xuanmin's robe. As he extended his arms to heave himself further up, a scream came from the doorway. "Ah! Don't touch me! Help! Help!" The voice was shrill, deafening, desperate, and most of all, unpleasant, as if the owner had seen a ghost. In Shushian's surprise, his hands wavered and he lost his grip. He fell from Xuanmin's chest and fluttered down to land gracelessly right on his face. Humiliated, Shushian refused to make eye contact with anyone after his fall. His limbs were stiff as he lay there unmoving as if he'd perished upon touching the ground. Xuanmin ignored the unending screams outside and crouched down to look at the paper figure sprawled on the ground and playing dead. "Not getting up?" he asked indifferently. Xuxian played dead even harder. Xuanmin tapped on the back of his paper head with a finger. "Time to burn you, then." Without further comment, he lit a fire starter. The tiny flame licked close to the paper, and Xuxian could feel the heat baking his body. "Where did your Buddhist compassion go?" Xuxian cried. "Did you feed it to the dogs?" At this, Xuanmin stayed his hand as if he'd recollected something. His expression flickered for a moment, then he shook his head and put out the fire starter. Picking Shushian up by one of his paper feet, Xuanmin asked in a low voice, "Still want to climb?" Shushian covered his face with both hands while being dangled upside down, even more humiliated. Still, he couldn't resist retorting, "I'll climb your dad!" Yeah, Xuanmin really does treat Shushian like a particularly stubborn cat. And of course, it'd be like a fancy white Persian fluffy cat. Or a Siamese cat that looks all scruffy and is dusty. Because it got out of the house and has been on the streets since he's been here 6 months, 6 weeks. It's all dirty and stuff. He's got it by the tail. Or the scruff. As Xuanmin tucked Shushian back into the bag without further comment, lumbering footsteps rushed toward the inner chamber. Uncovering his eyes, Shushian saw Liu Chong staring blankly at them. He had just escaped the array and seemed to have been through quite an ordeal. His blue robe was torn in several places, with stuffing protruding from the holes, and his expression was anguished as he turned to say something to Xuanmin. However, before Liu Chong could speak, his gaze fixed on the old lady holding onto the millstone, and he froze. Grandma? He called to her hesitantly. Perhaps the apparition in the array had attacked him, for he shrank back, too afraid to step forward. Old Lady Liu raised her lifeless eyes to look at Liu Chong. As soon as she saw him, tears sprang to her eyes and streamed down her face. With a pained sigh, still supporting herself against the millstone, she gestured to Liu Chong. "Chong heir, what happened to your clothes?" The moment he heard her tone, all the suffering Liu Chong had endured within the array was wiped from his mind. He rushed forward with watering eyes and fell to his knees, trying to grasp old Lady Liu's hand. "Grandma, why did you shrink? Why can't I touch you?" The millstone had drained the old woman for far too long. Now she stood barely half the height of the average elder, her form hunched and frail. She was none of this to Liu Chong, though. Instead, she said none of this to Liu Chong, though. Instead, she pursed her lips and smiled. "Grandma's old. People shrink when they're old. It's fine if you can't touch me." Grandma, why haven't you come to see me? I folded so many ingots. Didn't you say if I folded them and wrote a name on them, everyone would come to take them? But I fold and burn them every day, and no one ever comes to see me. Why haven't you come even once?" I want to hear you talk. I want to talk to you, but I never see you. I've I've already forgotten what I wanted to say. Liu's Chong, Liu Chong's mind was still that of a child. Upon seeing the grandmother he'd missed so dearly, he gasped out the rest of his words, then started to cry. He lacked the restraint of an adult man, so he sobbed like a waterfall, as if his tears could empty out all the words he'd stored up for 3 years and forgotten. Grandma is listening. Even if Chung Air doesn't tell me, your grandma already knows. Old Lady Liu wiped her tears. I'm always watching you day and night. While grandmother and grandson wept, the man outside burst into the house like a mad one. Help! Help! Don't touch me! Stay away! The newcomer's hair was disheveled and his clothes were ragged. He must have taken his fair share of tumbles because his body was covered in mud and his appearance was wretched. Yeah, oof, and poor baby. Shushian is like a typical orange cat, always curious and reckless. Yeah, I could definitely see that, Ruby. Yeah, the scene is. Whew. Wait, isn't that Scribe Liu? Shushian said after studying him. From the looks of it, Liu Chong had been quite lucky. The array must have terrified Scribe Liu beyond imagination, given how he'd recklessly charged inside the house despite his intense reluctance to enter it earlier. Xuanmin frowned at Scribe Liu's mud-covered clothes and stepped aside. Scribe Liu was still rushing forward. With no one to catch him, he crashed directly into Liu Chong and fell to the ground on his behind. With that, he found himself face to face with old Lady Liu. Scribe Liu was instantly petrified. His body stiffened and his eyes went wide. In his terror, he even forgot to breathe. Sweet baby. Oh. He just wants his grandma. Trap him under the house. Yeah. What a sweet baby. Right? He does just want his grandma. A man who'd committed too much evil would eventually find himself unable to face his own mother. His miserable appearance contrasted starkly and ironically with that of the weeping Liu Chong. Old Lady Liu wiped out her tears before looking at Scribe Liu. Her sobs gradually subsided, though her eyes remained like hazy pools. Juxtaposed with her calm expression, they somehow appeared to shine with an even deeper sorrow. Why are you trembling? Old Lady Liu asked, her voice tinged with fathomless grief. Are you afraid that your own mother has come to take your life? Scribe Liu shook his head. His face was ashen, his lips trembling as he stammered, I just... He could barely complete his sentence before he choked on his words, unable to continue. He lowered his head and took a couple of deep, gasping breaths, then sank to his knees. Bowing low, he knocked his head against the floor in front of his mother. Your son foolishly believed that sorcerer's nonsense and committed a grave sin in his confusion. Your son was unfilial. After saying this, he burst into tears. His forehead, bloodied from hitting the ground, remained pressed there. He didn't manage another coherent word. You're only saying this now? Shushan stared at Scribe Liu's curled up form, utterly repulsed. As Shushan had always been straightforward, what he couldn't stand the most were people who dodged responsibility with excuses. To be unfilial was to be unfilial. To be selfish and cruel was to be selfish and cruel. Now this man was trying to push all the blame onto a sorcerer. Unbelievably shameless. Only your parents would buy this kind of nonsensical garbage, Shushan thought. Old Lady Liu said nothing, but she continued to stare at Scribe Liu. No one would be happy to see the son they raised reduced to such a state. She paused for a long time before sighing. A single hand cannot clap on its own, she said at last. If he hadn't had the desire, no number of alluring words from the sorcerer would have swayed him into action. Upon hearing this, Scribe Liu stiffened mid-kneel. He cautiously raised his head to look at old Lady Liu, hoping to glean some hints from her eyes, and found no trace of a vengeful spirit there. Oh, she's not buying it. He ran out of rope. Old Lady Liu sighed again and waved him over. Come here. She had always been slow to anger. Her tone stayed gentle, but it carried a hint of resignation. There was no animosity within that resignation. She is patient. 3 years, like, stuck to a millstone underground, like, slowly sucking away her energy and feeding off her resentment. Like, she's patient. Like, wow. It's a good grandma / mother. Upon hearing her words, she had always been slow to anger. Her tone stayed gentle, but it carried a hint of resignation. There was no animosity within that resignation. Oh, I don't buy his excuses either. Like, I don't think she does either, but she's like, it's my son. Like, yeah. Upon hearing her words, Scribe Liu hesitated for a moment, but then shuffled closer to old Lady Liu. His eyes held the glimmer of hope. After all, if she truly had turned into a vengeful spirit, she wouldn't use such a tone. There might still be some room to turn things around. Look at your mother, she said softly. I really haven't seen you properly in a long time, Mom, Scribe Liu added, offered an inch and taking a mile. Old Lady Liu looked back at him, then slapped him hard across the face. No one had expected her to do this so suddenly. For a moment, they were all stunned. Scribe Liu clutched at his face, more shocked than anyone else. Mom, you... He could barely find the words. I want to hit him too, Shushan sighed. She is a very good mom and grandma. Yeah, you go, Grandma! Scribe Liu was too dismayed to hear Shushan's mumbling. He held his face for a long time before returning to his senses. I had no choice. I really didn't. I hired the sorcerer for you. He hooked onto the idea, seeming to find a way to spin the explanation. That's right. I hired the sorcerer for you from the start. Your health was getting worse and worse, and you were always hunched over to one side. The quacks from the Jiang family told me it was the result of multiple illnesses piling up, making things difficult to cure. That's why I decided to find a sorcerer. Mom, you might not understand, but the northeast house you lived in was a prime location. That sorcerer told me that when laid out properly, it could bring even the dead back to life. I wanted you to get better quickly, but Doesn't the northeast house belong to your second son, Liu Jiang? asked Shushan, puzzled. Jing'er moved in later, Scribe Liu rushed to say halfway through a sigh. After a very long silence, old lady Liu spoke. I know. She looked at her son, her gaze nostalgic. Not only did you put me in a wonderful house, but you visited every day, asking after me and serving me tea and water. Even when I was bedridden and paralyzed in the end, you still came to sit by my bed whenever you had the time. Your mother remembers everything. Some people were just contradictory. You couldn't call Scribe Liu unfilial because he had fulfilled his filial duties. But you also couldn't call him filial when a few words from a sorcerer had convinced him to trap his mother's spirit beneath the compound. Clearly, he was the type to squeeze every last drop from whatever he could. But, old lady Liu continued, it was after you trapped me here that I realized how you got me that wonderful house. You bought it using my Chang'er's life. That slap I gave you was for Chang'er. After saying this, old lady Liu abruptly raised her hand again. Slap! She launched a second strike on the other side of Scribe Liu's face. And this one is for the Jiang family clinic. The medicine I took during my last few days, you switched it out, didn't you? Hazy as my mind was, I could tell it had changed. You are my child. I knew what you were thinking. She shook her head and sighed. You saw that your mother... Okay. My dad reset the router, so hopefully we're not going to be going back and forth with Spinny Wheel of Doom. But yeah. Yeah, no, really reads them out. Hopefully the quality wasn't too bad. Like, I hope it wasn't glitching. But yes. I'm going to reread, like, the last paragraph I was on. Actually, I'm going to give it a second for you guys to come back in. Awesome. You know, I was feeling it. Well, speaking as Madame Jiang, I feel like I got that granny voice on point. What's done is done, but you shouldn't have laid the blame on the Jiang family. I couldn't open my eyes or speak by then, but I still could overhear what the maids were talking about. You wronged the Jiang family, smearing them as quacks who killed their patients. Have you no shame? It's fun to do. Old Lady Liu closed her eyes. This form of hers, released from entrapment, couldn't hold on much longer. Within a few brief moments, her body began to fade and her features turned indistinct. I am your birth mother. Chang'er is your son. The debt owed between family members is different from what's owed to outsiders. For 3 years, your mother pushed the millstone for you. With this, I've repaid my debt for your care. Chang'er has lived here for so long that he's repaid the 20 years you spent raising him. Now you must repay the debt you owe the Jiang family as well. Mom, what do you mean by that? Scribe Liu raised his head, his expression both panicked and befuddled. A debt ode is a debt owed. It cannot be erased and must always be paid. Old Lady Liu took a long look at him, then turned to Xuanmin. Master, is it time for me to go? She'd probably taken Xuanmin for one of those monks who performed last rites, helping spirits cross over. Xuanmin looked down at her and pointed to the millstone. Old Lady Liu didn't wait for him to explain. She nodded, as if understanding what he meant. Hello, Esper Lady. So we just got out of the array. We found a different array. And apparently Scribe Liu had used another array and a millstone to imprison his mom underneath Chong'er's house and have her push it for 3 years for good luck for the family. And now she's kind of reaming him out in a very motherly way. And it's fantastic, and I am having a great time doing the granny voice. But yes. A debt owed is a debt owed. It cannot be erased and always... Oh no, that's a little... You know what? I'm just gonna start there. It's the beginning of the page. Debt owed is a debt owed. It cannot be erased and must always be repaid. Old Lady Liu took a long look at him, then turned to Xuanmin. Master, is it time for me to go? She had probably taken Xuanmin for one of those monks who performed last rites, helping spirits cross over. Xuanmin looked down at her and pointed to the millstone. Old Lady Liu didn't wait for him to explain. She nodded, as if understanding what he meant. Then she turned to look at Liu Chong. The sobbing fool had raised his head. He hadn't quite understood her words earlier, but now he could sense her impending departure. Yeah. Grandma, are you tired? He asked. Yes, Grandma is very tired, said Lady Liu gently. She needs to sleep for a while. If I burn ingots, can I see you? Grandma can hear everything you say. You may not be able to see her, but she will always be watching you. With that, old Lady Liu turned around and entered the millstone. Xuanmin reached down to pick it up, then picked up Jiang Xining, who'd reverted to his paper doll form and was lying on the ground. Turning without a word, he walked outside. Master! Master! My face! Scribe Liu was frozen for a while, then stumbled out after him, shaking as he touched his own face. Why is it swollen? Xuanmin glanced sideways at him. Scribe Liu's cheeks had ballooned, and 2 palm marks were printed clearly upon them, crimson as blood. Some of his skin had sloshed off, causing the web of veins underneath to protrude angrily, a terrifying sight. Vengeful spirits can't touch the living, said Xuanmin. In the blink of an eye, Scribe Liu's face had become so swollen that he could barely speak. Then why? But a vengeful spirit harboring grievances has a single chance to seek justice, continued Xuanmin. They can leave a mark on the wrongdoer. Scribe Liu's face was filled with fear. What comes after the mark? Will she return to take my life? She didn't leave that mark for herself, Xuanmin said coldly. She left it for your son, Liu Chong, and for the Jiang family. Both of them have suffered greatly because of you. Her punishments were simply giving him a taste of his own medicine. Oh, don't leave! Help me! Please help me, great master! Scribe Liu fell to his knees with a plop and shuffled forward to clutch the hem of Xuanmin's robe. Oh, he's gotta love that! With how clean conscious he is. Oof. From his perch at the pouch's entrance, Xuanmin suddenly spoke. Hey, Liu, you bastard. I have a question. Did you travel to Huameng, Guangdong this summer? In a panic, Scribe Liu thought Xuanmin had asked the question. He shook his head hard. No, no, I've never been that far. After answering, he shivered and continued to plead. Help me! Help me! That's impossible, Xian said coldly. It's the truth! I swear it! How could I dare lie to you? Scribe Liu was on the verge of smashing his head to the ground in a bow. He really didn't look like he was lying. But how could that be? If he hadn't gone to Huameng, why was he carrying Shushian's mark of blood? Shushian stared at the bloodstain that Xuanmin had pointed out earlier, both irritated and confused. If you tell even a single lie... I dare not! I dare not! Wait! Desperate for help, Scribe Liu was the picture of eagerness, as if he longed to split open his skull and show them the insides. That's right. I do know someone from Huameng in Guangdong, a fisherman. I don't have much connection to him, but he sold me what looked like a marble made of gold. A marble? What did it look like? Shushian interjected, recalling the droning sound he'd heard before falling into the array. He couldn't stop himself from asking, Where is the marble now? Why are you mumbling? Speak up! Oh, wait, I skipped a line. Scribe Liu shrank away and stammered, It's... Why are you mumbling? Speak up! Getting a half-hearted answer at a moment like this made Shushian want to toss Scribe Liu into the South Sea. The sorcerer said the marble had a great amount of spiritual energy, so he melted it into the millstone. Scribe Liu's head was practically shrunk into his collar. Shushian fell silent, but inside he was bursting with fury. You refined my dragon body to make your millstone? You motherfucker! Why didn't you stuff yourself inside? So great was Shushian's rage that he passed out on the spot. Seeing that he'd gone limp, Xuan Min made to leave again. No, you can't! Don't leave! Help me! Help me! Scribe Liu clutched at Xuan Min's robe in a death grip. Not gonna like that. Xuan Min looked down at Scribe Liu for a few moments before stooping down. In a low voice, he muttered a few words in a language Scribe Liu didn't understand. They seemed like part of a sutra. Next, the monk struck Scribe Liu's forehead with the back of his hand. Scribe Liu felt the vibrations ringing through his skull as if 1,000 bells were pealing there. You removed the mark, he muttered, sounding pleased. It's only insurance. The debt must be repaid. At these words, Scribe Liu froze. Xuan Min wrenched his robe free of Scribe Liu's hands, stood, and turned to leave. Returning to his senses, Scribe Liu crawled after Xuan Min, crying, Buddhists must be merciful and compassionate. This humble monk cultivates no compassion. Xuan Min didn't look back as he strode away. Before we continue, how you doing, Esper lady? Anything new in your life? Oh yeah. Wait, is it 2 chapters or 3? Okay, it's 2 chapters. So it looks kind of shorter. Drafting the vest for the suit right now. And you're doing good. Ooh, very cool. Alright. Chapter 8. Medical Bell. As Shushan drifted within his rage-induced stupor, he seemed to hear an odd ringing sound coming from inside Xuanmin's body that came from both near and far. Yeah, if you put up a photo in the community page, you can pull it up on my phone because I still don't know how to do the thing that Kichter does where it flips the screen without it, like, tunneling. But yeah, only if you're comfortable with it. As Shushan drifted within his rage-induced stupor, he seemed to hear an odd ringing sound coming from inside Xuanmin's body that came from both near and far. It reverberated through Shushan, rendering it impossible to breathe. So I think I got this. Do I want to do it like this or... Best I got. He stayed unconscious for a very long time. By the time he woke and peeked out through the pouch's opening once more, they were no longer inside the Liu residence. Looking around, Shushan saw what appeared to be a bedroom. The bed was neatly made, the lamps were bright, and the faint aroma of moringa leaves wafted around the room, along with the faint, almost imperceptible smell of medicine. Okay, I want to know what a moringa leaf is. Moringa leaf. A moringa leaf. Images. Apparently the miracle tree. Looks like a fern. Interesting. Like just a leaf. What are the benefits? Moringa oleifera is a fast-growing, drought-resistant tree from South Asia, often called the miracle tree for its highly nutritious and edible parts, including leaves, pods, and seeds, used in food and traditional medicine. It's rich in vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, with leaves tasting like spinach when cooked and roots resembling horseradish. That's a contrast! The tree is cultivated globally for its nutritional value, with leaves used in powders and teas, pods cooked like green beans, and seeds pressed for oil. Its appearance is a small to medium tree with an umbrella-shaped canopy, fine textured branches, and fragrant white flowers. Its growth grows quickly and is drought resistant, making it valuable in arid regions, and has edible parts in the leaves, pods, seeds, and roots. Okay. Xuanmin was standing in front of an ornate, round wooden table. Jiang Xining, that nuisance of a paper doll, was standing on top of it, while next to him was the empty millstone from the Liu residence, a thin cloth bag, a copper basin filled with fresh water, and a pale green porcelain tea set with the name carved into the underside. Gu Yun Hall. Ooh, I've never had it, but I could see how it would be pretty tasty in soups. I might see if I can find some. I do have an Asian market near my house, so maybe I'll see if they have some. They said it tastes like spinach. I have a good recipe. Fortune follows. All of them auspicious names. By contrast, a name like Guai Yun made it sound like the inn was blessing its residents with a swift journey to the heavens. I'm a Filipino. It grows everywhere back home. There's lots. I'm back. Hopefully, that's the last one for the stream. Okay. Only those who have had their brains pecked out would stay here, Shushan thought. Clearly, Xuanmin was one of those. a chicken and probably cleaned out his entire skull. Yeah, of course. Thank you guys for letting me know when the stream does that, because sometimes, like, when I was doing the granny voice, I completely miss it. And I want you guys to have the best stream possible. So it's supposed to be fun for all of us. Xuanmin meticulously washed his hands within the copper basin. Watching this, Shuxian had to admit that Xuanmin possessed a lovely set of fingers, slender and fair, and the bones of his knuckles were linear when he extended them. He seemed completely unaware of the concept of hurrying. He did everything at a steady, methodical pace. Even the act of washing his hands contained a stolid solemnity, as if he were reciting a sutra. I like how Shuxian just can't stop with the insults. Have to say, the way you wash your hands, you look like you're performing a funeral service. Xuanmin locked eyes with Shuxian. It's exactly that. For who? Lady Shu. Lady Shu. Melancholic sigh came from the millstone. Thank you very much, master. Who else could it have been other than old Lady Liu? Shuxian stared up at Xuanmin, expressionless. How long was I asleep? Enough for you to learn that the old lady's maiden name. Enough for you to learn that old lady's maiden name, I see. He almost said, how long was I out cold? But the memory of passing out in rage was not a glorious one. For the sake of his dragon's pride, he reworded the story. Shaking water drops from his hands, Xuanmin meticulously dried them with white cloth. You passed out for 10 hours. It's night now. Why haven't you been tossed in a moat yet? Do you have to rub salt in everyone's wounds? You're a coffin lid that pinch whoever tries to close you, Shuxian thought with fury. He snapped his mouth shut, unwilling to talk to Xuanmin anymore. He didn't know how to make small talk at all. Xuanmin paid no heed to Shuxian. Instead, he put down the towel and unwrapped his cloth bag, taking out a small stack of yellow papers and a brush. Insulted Shuxian's middle name. Yup. Beside the copper basin was a small dish of ink, freshly ground. Xuanmin spread a sheet of yellow paper, dipped the brush into the ink, and wrote a few characters. Lady Shu from the Liu clan. The 23rd of the 7th month, year of Bing Yin. Next, Xuanmin retrieved a stick of incense from a cloth bundle before folding the yellow paper bearing old Lady Liu's maiden name thrice. He dipped it into the candle flame, then placed it on the millstone. The thin yellow paper was surprisingly slow to burn, but the millstone's surface darkened and became coated in a layer of paper ash. With one end touched to the smoldering paper, Xuanmin slowly rotated the incense stick, letting it burn through. It is. It's a great insult. Shuxian couldn't hold back any longer. Rites for the deceased? He asked. He had only seen the usual rites, often called Buddha's Healing Seven. It consisted of a bunch of old, bald donkeys, just like Xuanmin, sitting in a circle, their heads shiny enough to light up the entire hall. They would alternate between 2 shifts, day and night, ceaselessly chanting sutras for the deceased for a full 7 days and nights. Once, Shuxian had pursued the wrong person and ended up in a house in the middle of a funeral. Surrounded by grieving relatives, he'd helplessly sat there for 7 long days, the monk's incessant murmurs buzzing in his ears, leaving him with a migraine so severe he wished he could hang himself on the coffin. And I did not forget the donkey. We're at 13. Since then, he'd come down with a headache whenever he saw a monk. He He was terrified that Xuanmin might also chant for 7 days and 7 nights. If that happened, he might as well jump off a building right now and put an end to it all. As Xuanmin rotated the incense stick, a thin wisp of blue smoke coiled around the millstone, releasing a subtle sandalwood fragrance. The hands are washed, the words inscribed, with incense burning, the sutras intoned, all to ferry the soul to the afterlife. He was really going to chant sutras. Shushian immediately dove out of the pouch. "What are you doing?" Xuanmin asked. "I don't want to live anymore," Shushian whined. "Going to jump." Xuanmin could say nothing to that. Of course, Shushian couldn't actually jump off a building. The most he could do was tumble from Xuanmin's waist to land on the ornate round table. When Shushian was halfway to rolling off the edge, Xuanmin grabbed the paper doll and put him back on the table. Xuanmin was very fussy, not at all like a proper monk. This could be seen from both his behavior and the well-furnished guest room he was staying in. At this moment, his fastidiousness was flaring again, for he seemed displeased with how crumpled Shushian's body was. He unceremoniously smoothed out the creases with a finger, then picked up a hefty stone paperweight and pressed it on top of Shushian. Am I the only one that finds that, like, I don't wanna say strange, but, like, almost invasive? Like, you really just smoothed out what's clearly a sentient being? Like, I feel like that's almost like fondling him. Like, I know that's not the intent, but I'm like, "Did you really just do that, Xuanmin?" Like, okay. Like, the paperweight I can understand, like, that's whatever. But the smoothing him out, I'm like, it is very awkward but funny. Yeah. Okay. The paperweight was a narrow rectangular block, roughly half the size of a palm. It left Shushian's head and 2 thin legs exposed, while his hands barely peeked out from either side. Shushian thrashed a couple of times, but was only able to lift his hands a little. The rest of him remained immobile. "You bastard!" Shushian howled in his head. Xuanmin ignored him and focused on the incense. As it dwindled to its end, he quietly recited a single line from his sutras before falling silent. It seemed this was what he meant by intoning. It differed greatly from Shushian's expectations. It's like smoothing out a doll's dress, a little weird. At last, the paper and incense burned out as one. Just as the last ember flickered and died, Xuanmin tapped the millstone that had bound Old Lady Liu for over 3 years. A series of crackling sounds echoed through the air. The millstone, which had looked so solid and unbreakable before, suddenly shattered into several pieces. At the same time, the faint voice of Old Lady Liu echoed again. "I feel as if a great burden has been lifted. I will take my leave now. Thank you." With her words, Shushian saw a shadow flicker across the millstone. Then it vanished, together with the ashes from the incense and the paper. However, at the moment the millstone cracked and Old Lady Liu disappeared, 2 other faint sounds echoed within the room. Like the soft jingling of bells attached to a carriage, it reverberated down the street, drifting over from afar. Then something rolled out from the center of the cracked millstone and landed on the table. 2 sounds in succession. No, that's not gonna work. Hang on. That'll work. Clang, clang. Or maybe. That's a little better. Or clink, clang. Shushian felt something rolling toward him across the table. Before he could lift his head, some round thing had rolled right over the back of it. What blind piece of garbage was that? I'll break it! Xuanmin reached out, and the round object rolled right off the edge of the table and into his palm. He held it between his fingers, examining it. A golden marble the size of a sheep's eye. Xuxian froze. Sheep's eye? Golden marble? So it really was. Of course. A dragon's body compressed into a golden marble. Like a random sorcerer would be capable of refining that. All this sorcerer had done was shove it crudely inside the millstone. Right as Xuxian was celebrating, Xuanmin said, Since it's a blind piece of garbage, let's break it. No, wait! Don't you dare! I'll break you! Why? Is it no longer garbage? Asked Xuanmin blandly. It's no longer garbage, Xian grumbled. Don't you want to break it any more? No breaking! It's mine! Who dares to break it? Yours. Where's your proof? Xuxian tried to switch to charm. Very well. Move the paperweight aside, and I'll show you. Xuanmin glanced at him. A description will suffice. Xuxian would rather vomit his guts onto this bald donkey's face than tell him a thing. However, the gold marble was truly important. While it was in Xuanmin's hands, Xuxian dared not take rash action and was therefore forced to comply a little. Hold the marble to the candle flame. You'll see. Xuxian said in his best monotone. He would see the vague shape of a dragon coiled within, although it would be hard to tell since its head and claws were curled against its body. And I did not forget the donkey. We are at 14. The picture's great. If you notice in the corner too, the picture on the wall is also a dragon scroll, which is a nice touch by the artist. Yeah, Xuxian's so mad. And also kind of panicking a little because he's like, that's my marble! Don't smash it! Please! It's mine! Yeah, he's so done. Xuanmin's so done. Instead of explaining that, Xuxian gritted his teeth and said, You'll see some curved patterns inside. Have you ever seen any other translucent golden marbles? He picked up the weirdest, most misbehaving cat ever. Xuanmin brought the golden marble closer to the candle flame. Sure enough, though initially indistinguishable from ordinary gold, the marble became slightly translucent, revealing a coiled shape within. A snake, said Xuanmin. Xuxian bit his tongue, but his expression was livid. Your mother's a snake. Don't you believe me now? Move your stupid paperweight away, okay? Give me back my marble. Xuanmin wasn't an unreasonable person. Having heard Xuxian's proof and rationale, he reached over and removed the paperweight. Xuxian propped himself up, gripping the table to shake off the vertigo from being crushed under what amounted to a mountain of stone for him. He stretched his paper arms toward Xuanmin, his tone impatient. Where's my marble? Give it to me, quick! Xuanmin pointed at the center of the table. First, go, enough with the bullshit! Just give it to me! Shu Xian interrupted, irritated. Xuanmin stared at him for a moment before placing the marble between Shu Xian's paper paws. Thump. The golden marble wasn't light. Paper had no way of supporting its weight. Shu Xian felt his hand slam downward. His vision went dark, and the accursed marble dragged him right off the table, sending him crashing to the floor. That's called karma. Like, he was trying to be like, don't you want to go toward the middle of the table where you're not going to overbalance? He didn't want to live anymore. When Xuanmin plucked Shu Xian from the ground, his tiny hands were still tightly clutching at the golden marble, like a feeble miser guarding his treasure to the end. Yeah, I love that Xuanmin is so nonchalant. That's what makes it amazing. I was only asking you to move closer to the center of the table. Xuanmin placed the paper doll in that spot and gazed down at him. Still going to interrupt me next time? Mind your own damn business, Shu Xian hissed mentally. However, he was reeling from the nasty fall and afraid that upsetting Xuanmin might lead to his precious marble being confiscated. Fine, Shu Xian said with a reluctant snort. I'll suffer the injustice of letting you finish speaking next time. Clutching the marble, he rolled around on the table until he bumped into something with a clang. Only then did he remember that 2 objects had fallen out of the millstone, not one. Sprawled over the top of the golden marble, Shu Xian glanced at the obstacle and realized he'd collided with a silver disc the size of an apricot. There was a thin seam around its edge. When touched, it made a tinny noise. What's this? Shu Xian asked as he rolled a distance away to get a different view of it. But even from there, it wasn't something he recognized. Jiang Xining's voice broke in. It's a medical bell. With his body plastered seamlessly to the golden marble, Shu Xian rolled right into the stone paperweight, where he finally came to a stop. You're awake. I was awake the entire time, just unable to speak, said Jiang Xining. My ability to talk just returned, probably because it's nighttime. His once dull voice was gentle, infused with an ineffable vitality that hadn't been there before. It was as if some invisible burden he'd had been lifted from him, leaving him much more relaxed. Right after speaking, he slipped from the table to the chair, then from the chair to the floor, where he reverted to his scholar's appearance. Picking up the medical bell, he rubbed it with his fingers. It belongs to my family. Shu Xian was taken aback. Your family? Jiang Xining nodded. He showed Shu Xian one side of the bell, where a name was carved. Jiang Yang. That's my great-grandfather's name, he explained. He used to be a traveling doctor. He'd walk the streets every day, making calls to his patients. In those days, all traveling doctors would hang a silver medical bell on their medicine chest to notify their patients of their arrival as they walked around. When the sick heard it, they would come out to receive treatment. This was his bell. These days, traveling doctors are rare. Most of them are based in physical clinics and pharmacies. The Jiang family practiced medicine for generations, and this bell was passed down from my great-grandfather to my parents to keep our roots in mind. Ooh, you posted in the community. When we get to the next chapter, which should be pretty soon, yes, we will check the community. Your parents, Xuanmin frowned. He reached for the bell to examine it. After a moment, he asked, Have you any blood relatives left? I do, said Jiang Xining. My older sister was married off to Anqing, so she escaped the fire. Your parents' souls are trapped inside this bell. It's different from Lady Shu's situation with the millstone. I can't free them for now. You'll need 3 drops of Laogong blood from one of your living relatives. Laogong blood. Having been born into a medical family, Jiang Xining knew exactly what he was talking about. You mean fresh blood from the acupoint in the center of the palm? Xuanmin nodded. After returning the medical bell to Jiang Xining, Xuanmin glanced at the cloth bag nearby. Shu Xian followed his gaze and noticed that there was another incense stick in the cloth bag. Hey, you already used one incense stick to send off Lady Shu, Shu Xian said, carelessly pointing at it. So what's the other one for? To send off the scholar. Xuanmin was blunt. Before Jiang Xining could react, Shu Xian had already raised his head. What? You... Before he could finish his sentence, Xuanmin braced himself against the table, his brow firmly creased and his eyes slightly closed as if he was unwell. Shu Xian stopped talking to study Xuanmin. Bald donkey. He tentatively called out to him twice, but Xuanmin didn't respond. Instead, he remained seated with his eyes closed, as though he were meditating. Fine red lines, reminiscent of the legs of a spider, suddenly crept from the small mole on his neck. However, Shu Xian didn't notice this detail, even as he stared at Xuanmin for a while. Once Shu Xian was sure Xuanmin wasn't dying or regaining consciousness, he waved at Jiang Xining. 15. Yeah, we're almost to the other chapter, so... Around 10 minutes later, a frail-looking scholar could be seen hurrying down the road on the outskirts of Ningyang County, away from Guiyun Hall. On his shoulders sat a paper doll, greedily clutching a golden marble in his arms. Jiang Xining and Shu Xian. As Shu Xian urged him to walk faster, Jiang Xining hesitantly said, I still feel like this is wrong. What's wrong? Shu Xian asked, stroking his golden marble. Rushing off and leaving the master behind like that? Shu Xian glared at him. Are you still sleep-talking, you damn bookworm? He's a ghost catcher, and we're the ones who got caught. Have you ever seen escaped criminals bringing the warden along for a prison break? No, Jiang Xining admitted. He understood what Shu Xian was saying, but after thinking a while longer, he continued, Still, don't say still. But no buts either. Jiang Xining looked at him, defeated. Shu Xian sprawled over the golden marble as he drawled. I know, I'm always right. What could Jiang Xining say to that? Ningyang County observed a nightly curfew. Barriers and guardhouses had been set up at the larger crossroads while the watchmen stood by with bags of wine to keep themselves warm. All 4 of the city gates were now tightly shut. Normal townfolk who wished to leave the city at this time would have to sprout wings. However, the curfew wasn't an issue for the 2 in this situation. The advantages of Jiang Xining's paper figure became invaluable now. When necessary, he could compress himself into a thin sheet and slip through doors and gaps. Shu Xian's eyes were keener than a dog's. Every time he spotted the watchman's shadowy forms in the distance and barked his orders to Jiang Xining, he was confident and decisive. Right? Turn east. At the next corner, hug the wall and head into the alley. Continue straight, then turn west. Jiang Xining had a mild personality and was accustomed to obeying Shu Xian's orders, so he complied without question for a while. But after putting his faith in Shu Xian and walking for a long time, Jiang Xining finally couldn't take it anymore and stopped. Wise one, please shut up, he said, distressed. What's wrong? We're doing just fine. The watchmen haven't noticed us. I know, snapped Jiang Xining. They haven't noticed us, but I've noticed this fabric shop 3 times over. If I keep following your instructions, we won't be leaving the city until next year. Shu Xian hugged his golden marble. It's getting dark. We should find a place to rest soon. This hoodlum and his fragile ego, Jiang Xining thought. Another injustice to Jiang Xining. All right, he's at 10. He's definitely suffering. Without Shu Xian's useless directions, Jiang Xining made quite a bit more progress. Soon, they'd left the place they'd circled thrice and were traveling the main road. This building looks familiar. Shu Xian glanced around, sure that he had seen this street before. Jiang Xining grunted. You really have no sense of direction. We passed through this area this morning. How could you forget so quickly? His reminder jogged Shu Xian's memory. If they continued forward and headed east at the next corner, they'd see Scribe Liu's residence. Jiang Xining halted for a second. Shu Xian turned to the Liu family's compound. What is it? You want to go see him get his just desserts? Jiang Xining shook his head. That's Scribe Liu's own business. It has nothing to do with me. He lingered no longer and headed toward the city gate. Perhaps it was a doctor's nature, but he couldn't stand to watch others suffer. This might have been the biggest difference between him and people like Scribe Liu. Okay, so that is the end of chapter 8. We're going to do chapter 9. It's a very short chapter. And then we'd be at arc 2 for tomorrow, where we'd start tomorrow. But I'm going to take a quick peek at the community page. He really is a good boy. All right, let me pull up my community page. And then okay. I think that's our newest thing. There you go. There we go. It's a good start. I like the can of tuna. I think that's tuna. Yeah, why are the dead people so nice? Well, for the most part. I guess Shu Xian is technically not dead. Yay! Alright, that took a hot second, but we're back. Hopefully that was the last one for the stream. Okay. Chapter 9, The Old Clinic. Mountains and forests stood thick around the capital of Ningying County, though most of them were gentle and picturesque. Steep, treacherous areas were rare. The current state preceptor was a monk, which had led to the emergence of mountain temples in various provinces some years ago, and they'd flourished for a time. Recently, winter had been arriving earlier and earlier for some reason. Even the south saw endless heavy snowfall. It was often said that a snowy year signaled a bountiful harvest. However, recent years had also been plagued by poor rainfall, resulting in low yields and forcing the common folk to adopt more frugal lifestyles. When even making ends meet was difficult, no one spared money for temples. As a result, the number of abandoned temples in the mountains increased, and they were transformed into temporary shelters for travelers instead. By the time Jiang Xining and Shu Xian stopped to rest in a rundown temple on Mount Jiguan, snow had begun to drift down outside. As soon as they stepped inside, Shushan snagged the best spot for himself. He grabbed some dry straw from the ground, spread it out beneath the statue of Buddha, and settled in without a moment's hesitation. Now that they weren't traveling, he didn't have to maintain his paper doll form and reverted back to his human appearance. Kind of surprised he didn't do that when he found the marble. Like, I get that he doesn't want Xuan Min to see him, but like, still. He sat back languidly, clad in his black robes, as he propped his elbows on the statue's platform. One hand supported his chin, while the other continued to fiddle with his golden marble. Jiang Xining rubbed his forehead. Just looking at Xuxian made his head throb. Even if it's an abandoned temple, you ought to show some decorum. You can't just sit on a Buddha statue like that. Xuxian casually patted the statue's leg. Hey you, lend me the space. Tell me if you object. He solemnly pretended to wait, then jerked his chin at Jiang Xining. See? Nothing. You know what? Do whatever you want. I don't care. Jiang Xining blew the dust from the candle in front of the Buddha, then asked Xuxian for a fire starter. The wick was damp and a struggle to light, and he had to worry about accidentally setting himself on fire. Alright, I'm gonna just mark a collective 1 for Jiang Xining suffering. Because he's suffering. So he's at 11. Xuxian handed one over. When Jiang Xining was done with the candle, he extinguished the fire starter's flame. Where did you get that? Swiped it from the bald donkey's bag before we left, Xuxian said without batting an eye. 16. This is the first time I've encountered someone bold enough to steal from the warden during a prison break, Jiang Xining said, just about at the end of his rope. You won't miss it. Whenever the topic of Xuanmin came up, Jiang Xining felt a twinge of guilt. Do you dislike him that much? Just because he captured us? Xuxian shook his head. Then why are you so desperate to escape him? Jiang Xining pointed to himself and to Xuxian. To be honest, neither of us can do much. If we run into trouble along the way, things could get rough. I only have a medical bell on me, which isn't worth stealing, but your golden marble is a different story. If someone sets their sights on it... Xuxian held the golden marble in front of him, in front of the firelight, rolling it between his fingers. His reason for fleeing in the middle of the night lay in this golden marble, which also contained his dragon body. At present, his body had not fully recovered, and his connection to the golden marble was quite tenuous. Although it rested in his hand, he felt little to no sensation from it, as if he were merely holding an ordinary marble. But the men do anything remarkable, but he was still certain that the monk was hiding a secret. He couldn't feel anything from the marble, but perhaps Xuanmin could. The longer he and the golden marble stayed with Xuanmin, the more susceptible the marble became to the monk's influence. If anything went wrong with the marble, Xuxian could forget about restoring his dragon form. Besides, we have no idea where he's from or what his motives are, he said to Jiang Xining. He doesn't seem like a rogue sorcerer scrapping by for a living, nor does he act like those real monks who go around helping others out of compassion. During a couple of very brief moments, I could even sense a chilling ferociousness from him. Confused, Jiang Xining said, What do you mean by chilling ferociousness? Can't you explain it in a way that makes sense? Xuxian clicked his tongue. To put it bluntly, he's not like the average monk. At first, I couldn't figure out what made him different, but thinking about it now, monks have a warmth about them born from their strict adherence to their precepts. He has none of that. Didn't you feel it too, that he might be willing to take lives? Jiang Xining considered this for a moment, then shook his head. Not really, but to be honest, I was a little scared of him. I mean, that's not saying much, Jiang Xining. You don't seem like the most courageous of people. Like, no offense meant. There you have it, snapped Shushian. It's the same thing. Now that he'd mentioned not knowing where Xuan Min was from, Jiang Xining remembered something. By the way, did you smell medicine in the room earlier? Shushian is just a purebred ass. The donkeys would disown him. That's pretty funny. I did. I was also a bit confused. Was he taking something? I grew up smelling medicine, so I'm quite sensitive to it, Jiang Xining then thought some more and added, I'm somewhat familiar with that exact smell. We had a neighbor who used to come to the clinic for treatment. That's what it reminded me of. What was it used to treat? Jiang Xining hesitated for a moment. "Uh, Dissociation. People with dissociation often suffered from insomnia and experienced nightmares. Okay. Okay. I had to run upstairs myself after trying for a couple minutes and reset it. But we're back. Sorry about that, friends. I swear, if we've got like all right, we got 4 pages left. 4 pages. We're gonna get through this. In truth, Shu Xian had only a vague recollection of the reason he did it. His lifespan was so much longer than a human's. If he tried to list every detail of what he'd done, his head would explode. He only remembered that one winter he traveled north for some reason, and he'd passed through Ningyang County on his return trip. Sorry, Annika. We've got 4 pages! 4 pages! It was around evening then, and the county was being buffeted by a rare blizzard not unlike the one today. The tavern food stalls packed up early, leaving the streets deadly silent. At that time, Shushian wasn't maimed yet, so he had full use of his legs, and of course, a dragon would never fear the cold. To him, the wind and snow were little more than winter embellishments. Clad in a thin black robe, he strode through the flurries. Just as he passed by an alley, someone grabbed his arm. Shushian was a lone wolf in nature. He disliked being too close to others, and he was even more displeased when someone tugged on him unexpectedly. Frowning in annoyance, he turned and saw a middle-aged man in a gray robe who had an oil paper umbrella in hand. A square medicine chest was slung over his shoulder with a cloth strap. Judging by the footprints in the snow, he'd come from the alley. Shushian could no longer recall the man's appearance clearly, only that he had a beard and a kind face. The man pointed to the back of Shushian's hand. Such a deep wound! You have to apply medicine and bandage it, or you'll end up with a severe case of frostbite. 2 days of frostbite in this damp, cold weather, and it'll hurt every year when it rains and snows. You'll regret it then. The man's voice had a coaxing tone that lacked formality, as if talking to a young member of his family. Taken aback, Shushian peered down at his hand. The hand in the man's grip really was injured, the result of a careless brush with lightning. To Shushian, the injury was comparable to being scratched by a branch while walking, something one would forget in no time. Couple of days, and it'd be as good as new. However, to an ordinary person, it was a horrific injury. The back of his hand had been split open and blood had crusted on the edges of the wound, where the flesh curled outward, exposing the bone beneath. Without further ado, the man pulled the bewildered Shushian along, urging him down the alley. A short trip later, they stopped at a pair of red gates. Shushian assumed it was the man's house since he pushed open one of the gates and shouted someone's name inside. "Oh, and bring me the brazier by my desk," the man added. Then he opened his wooden medicine chest and began to carefully treat Shushian's wound. Someone came from inside the building and handed over a small copper brazier. Shushian noted the person in question was a middle-aged woman. Like the man, she seemed gentle. Behind her was a young boy about 7 or 8 years old. His head craned forward as he peered around her. When his eyes met Shushian's, he smiled, then pointed to Shushian's hand. "You have to keep it away from water for 2 days," the boy said in a grave voice, "especially cold water." "Go back in and study," the woman said with a smile, turning to shoo the child away. To Shushian, she said, "You really should keep it away from water, especially in this weather. You must be careful, or chronic pain will bother you year in and year out." Just as the man had said. "Are you in a hurry? Would you like to come in and warm up?" the man asked, his tone friendly. While the others had talked, he bound Shushian's hand with a strip of finely woven hemp, and even neatly avoided the painful areas as he tied a firm knot. "Uh, no, I still have matters to attend to," replied Shushian. He paused for a moment, then awkwardly added, "Thank you for your trouble. At least take this brazier with you. You need to keep that wound warm," the man insisted. He shoved the palm-sized object into Shushian's hand. Shushian might not have feared the cold, but he could still distinguish between it and heat. When the warm brazier was pressed into his palm, he looked down at the door frame and read the characters inscribed there. Jiang Family Clinic. A year later, when he found himself passing through Ningyang County again, he slipped into the Jiang family courtyard when no one was watching. After placing the copper brazier and a small pouch of golden pearls on the stone table outside, he strolled away. Upon returning to the county this last time, he remembered the clinic and decided to take a look, only to find it in ruins. The once red gates and the herb garden in the courtyard had been marred beyond recognition. All that remained was Jiang Xining. Thus, he felt compelled to help. After all, not everyone in this world was as treacherous and reprehensible as Scribe Liu. Where some were selfish and ungrateful, others were full of kindness and virtue. That's kind of cool that he had that connection to the Jiang family. You'd think he'd treat Jiang Xining a little nicer, though. Shushian glanced at the raging blizzard outside and leaned against the statue of Buddha. "Before we left, you told me to wait by the door while you did something at the master's table," Jiang Xining asked. "What did you do?" Shushian lazily grunted in acknowledgement. "Just left him a little something. A token of gratitude for his help in retrieving my marble." What he'd granted Xuan Min was none other than a piece of his real body, a dragon scale. While it couldn't bring the dead back to life, it was still part of a genuine dragon and far more precious than ingredients like mountain ginseng or lingxi mushrooms. He didn't know the reason for the man's health issue, but adding dragon scales to his medicine could only help. Yeah, no, they really got the short end of the stick, to put it very lightly. Most people wouldn't recognize a dragon scale on sight. It was round and thin, about the size of an elm leaf, and carried a dark green luster. A subtle aroma wafted from it, reminiscent of rainwater on mountain stones and full of an indescribable sweetness, like the translucent flesh of a freshly peeled shrimp. Um, so like I was following along and like, man, that smells nice until we got to the peeled shrimp. And I'm like, so you smell fishy. Huh. Shushian opened his eyes. "I'm a little hungry," he muttered. Meanwhile, in the first-class suite on the second floor of Gu Yun Hall, Xuan Min continued to sit at the table, his eyes closed. He remained frozen in this posture which he had been in when Shushan left. On the table before him was a sheet of yellow paper. Upon it rested the dragon scale left by Shushan, its scent slowly fanning out until it reached his nose. Xuanmin frowned and his eyes snapped open. The spider-like mole on his neck rapidly receded, returning to its original appearance. He glanced down at the table to see several large characters scrawled scrappily on the paper. Mystical medicine can cure anything, believe it or not. Xuanmin picked up the dark round disc lying next to the scribbles. Abruptly, as if remembering something important, he pulled a folded sheet of papers from his lapels. He opened it and smoothed it out, revealing 2 characters at the top. Find them. Next to the characters was a sketch of a round dark disc, identical to the object on the table. Find them. Xuanmin furrowed his brows and compared the 2, then refolded the note and tucked it away. Holding the object Shushan had left to him, Xuanmin sat quietly beneath the candlelight. Outside the window, chill wind swirled with snow, knocking gently on the doorframe. From the mountain paths to the city alleys, darkness unfurled, endless and winding. Okay, so that is actually where we're going to end tonight. Like, I wasn't kidding when I was like, we got 4 pages! 4 pages! I refuse to end it now with 4 pages to go. But we made it. And tomorrow we will start Arc 2, Nameless. I am so sorry about those, like, internet issues. I don't know what's going on because it really isn't that windy tonight. Or, like, raining or any weather. So I just... Come on, Comcast. Why you do me dirty? Like, come on. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so sorry for the tech issues. But yeah. No, I know, but it's still... Of course. But thank you for staying with me. Even with all the issues, I hope you enjoyed. I'm really having fun with this story. Like, it's a good story. But yeah, have a good night, everyone, and I will see you tomorrow. For anyone watching later, even with the issues, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Good night, everybody.